My beloved child. There is a message sitting unfinished on their phone right now. Not because they do not know what they want to say, but because every version they type sounds smaller than what happened today. They wrote your name first. Deleted it. Wrote it again. Then their thumb remained over the screen while a sentence they had avoided for far too long kept returning to them. I have something important to tell you. For a long time, they believed the hardest part of losing you was accepting that you had chosen to leave. They built their entire understanding of the ending around that belief. Whenever an old memory returned, whenever someone mentioned you unexpectedly, whenever they caught themselves wondering what might have happened if the two of you had handled one conversation differently, they came back to the same conclusion. You had made your choice. That was what they told themselves. It was easier than wondering whether they had misunderstood you. And you had your own version of what happened. You remembered the distance beginning quietly. There had been no dramatic betrayal, no single terrible argument that destroyed everything in one night. Instead, ordinary conversations became shorter. Questions that once received thoughtful answers began receiving tired ones. Plans became uncertain. Affection started carrying tension beneath it. Something was wrong. You could feel it before anyone admitted it. There were moments when you almost asked directly, "Are you trying to push me away?" But each time you saw how exhausted they seemed, the question changed in your mouth. Are you okay? They always said some version of the same thing. I'm fine. You knew they were not. What you did not know was how much pressure had been gathering around them outside the relationship. Their family was struggling through circumstances they rarely discussed openly. Responsibilities were shifting. People expected things from them. They had become the person everyone called when something needed solving, and because they had spent years learning how to appear strong, almost nobody realized how close they were to emotional collapse. You noticed pieces of it. You noticed that they sometimes stared at their phone without answering it. You noticed how quickly they changed the subject when family came up. You noticed that after certain conversations their whole face seemed different, as though they had returned from somewhere heavy and were trying not to bring that weight into the room with you. Once, you reached for their hand. They pulled away without thinking. The movement lasted less than a second. You still remembered it. They remembered it too. Neither of you understood how much meaning that tiny moment would eventually carry. You thought they no longer wanted comfort from you. They thought they were protecting you from problems they could not explain. And between those two interpretations, silence began building a wall. Then came the conversation you never knew would become important. Someone in their family asked to speak with you privately. You almost refused. By then you were already confused about where you stood, and the last thing you wanted was another person entering something that should have remained between the two of you. But you listened. The person sitting across from you was not cruel. That almost made it harder. They looked tired. Worried. They told you that the person you loved was carrying more than you understood. They're overwhelmed, they said. You answered carefully. I know. No. I don't think you do. That sentence stayed with you. You wanted to defend yourself. You wanted to explain that you had been the one checking in, the one trying to create space where they could speak honestly, the one wondering every night what had changed. Instead, you remained quiet. Then came the request. Maybe they need less pressure right now. You knew immediately what was being implied. You think I'm pressure? That's not what I said. It's what you mean. The person hesitated. And that hesitation hurt more than an immediate answer would have. They spoke about responsibilities, stress, family problems, expectations. They said the relationship mattered, perhaps too much, and that the person you loved was trying to hold everything together while refusing to admit they were struggling. Then they said something you would remember long after the conversation ended. If you really care about them, give them room to breathe. You left that conversation angry. Not only at the family member. At yourself. Because part of you wondered whether they were right. You began remembering every difficult conversation between you and your soulmate. Every question you had asked when they were already tired. Every moment when you wanted reassurance and they did not know how to give it. Every time you had said, "Just tell me what's wrong," believing honesty was simple. Maybe, you thought, love had become another responsibility they were afraid of failing. So you did something you believed was generous. And something that, looking back, you would eventually realize was also deeply flawed. You stepped back without telling them the whole reason. You answered less quickly. You stopped asking certain questions. You gave them the room someone else had told you they needed. When they seemed distant, you did not chase. When they said they had too much going on, you said you understood. When they expected you to argue for the relationship, you surprised them by becoming quiet. Neither of you knew that your silence meant completely different things. To you, it meant, "I love you enough not to make you choose between me and everything else." To them, it sounded like, "You were easier to leave than I thought." That misunderstanding became the beginning of the end. There was one conversation in particular they have replayed more times than you could know. They asked you, "Is this really what you want?" You paused. You wanted to say no. You wanted to tell them about the conversation with their family. You wanted to say, "I'm trying to make this easier for you." But you had promised not to involve anyone else, and beneath that promise was another fear you never admitted. What if you told them everything and they chose their family's opinion over you? What if they agreed that you had become another burden? What if asking them to fight for the relationship only confirmed exactly what you had been warned about? So instead of telling the truth, you said something careful. "I think maybe this is what you need." They stared at you. That wasn't my question. You knew it. You hated yourself for knowing it. But by then both of you had become too afraid of hearing the answer you imagined the other person would give. They asked again. "Is this what you want?" You looked away. And after a long silence, you said, "I don't want to make things harder for you." They heard rejection. You meant sacrifice. Neither interpretation was entirely fair. That is the painful part. Because sometimes relationships do not break only because somebody stopped loving. Sometimes they break because two frightened people begin translating each other through fear. Afterward, they told themselves that you had found an elegant way to leave without admitting you wanted out. You told yourself that if they wanted you to stay badly enough, they would have said so clearly. Both of you waited for courage from the other person. Neither recognized that the other was waiting too. Life continued. At least from the outside. There were responsibilities to handle, ordinary conversations to have, people who expected smiles, decisions that could not be postponed simply because a relationship had ended badly. They became skilled at appearing unaffected. Your name stopped appearing in conversations. The things connected to you slowly disappeared from obvious places. But not everything. There was one ordinary object you had once given them that remained tucked away with things they used often enough that throwing it out would have required a conscious decision. They never made that decision. Whenever they noticed it, they rarely allowed themselves to linger. That was how they managed memories of you. Brief contact. Immediate retreat. If a song brought back a certain drive together, they changed it. If someone asked about you, they answered with as few words as possible. If your profile appeared somewhere unexpectedly, they kept scrolling before curiosity could become pain. They called that moving on. Sometimes it was. Sometimes it was avoidance wearing a respectable name. You were not innocent either. There were nights when you opened an old conversation and searched for the moment everything changed, as though a relationship could be solved like a puzzle if you stared long enough at old sentences. You found messages that looked different after the ending. A short reply seemed colder than you remembered. A joke suddenly sounded defensive. A forgotten, "I'm sorry, I'm just tired," carried weight it had not carried before. But you could not ask what any of it meant. You had chosen silence too. And silence, once maintained long enough, develops its own momentum. Then today happened. It began without drama. The family member who had spoken to you all that time ago was talking with your soulmate about something completely unrelated. The conversation drifted. Old circumstances came up. The difficult period the family had once been going through was mentioned almost casually. Your soulmate said something about how badly they had handled that part of their life. The family member agreed. Then they said your name. Your soulmate went still. Not visibly enough that most people would have noticed. But the family member noticed. They had always known there were unfinished feelings around you. What they had never fully understood was how unfinished the truth was. They said, "I've wondered for a long time if I made things worse." Your soulmate looked at them. "What are you talking about?" The answer did not come immediately. That hesitation returned, the same kind of hesitation you had once seen. "I spoke to them." For a moment, your soulmate did not understand. "Who?" The family member said your name again. And suddenly the room felt different. "When?" "Around the time everything was happening." "What did you say?" The family member looked away. "I told them you were overwhelmed." Your soulmate frowned. "You talked to them about me?" "I was worried." "That isn't what I asked." Silence. Then the truth began coming out. Not all at once. Not dramatically. Piece by piece. The family member admitted telling you that perhaps the best thing you could do was give your soulmate space. Your soulmate stared at them. "You told them to leave me alone?" "I didn't tell them to leave you." "What exactly did you say?" The question came sharper this time. And the answer finally arrived. "I said if they cared about you, they should stop adding pressure." Your soulmate stood up. Not because they had planned to. Their body simply moved before their thoughts caught up. For years they had believed you withdrew because your feelings changed. Now someone was telling them there had been a conversation they never knew existed. They asked the question that hurt the most. What did they say? The family member became quiet. And for the first time, they looked ashamed. They defended you. Your soulmate said nothing. They said they knew you were struggling. They said they had been trying to help. Still nothing. I told them maybe helping meant stepping back. Your soulmate's expression changed. Then came the sentence that has been following them ever since. The family member said, "They told me they never wanted you to feel like you had to choose between them and us." Your soulmate sat down again. A memory returned immediately. Not one of the dramatic ones. Not the final conversation. Something smaller. You had once asked, "Do you ever feel like everybody needs something from you?" They had laughed it off. You had not. You had looked at them for a moment and said, "You know you don't have to perform with me." At the time they changed the subject. Today they finally understood that you had seen more than they realized. But understanding did not bring simple relief. It brought anger. Why didn't they tell me? The family member had no answer that could repair it. They said they didn't want to create problems between us. That should have been my decision. I know. No. You know now. There was hurt in that sentence. The family member did not defend themselves. Your soulmate walked away before the conversation could become something uglier. And then, alone, they did what they had avoided doing for a long time. They let themselves remember you without stopping the memory halfway through. The last conversation came back first. Is this really what you want? Your silence. I think maybe this is what you need. For years, that sentence had sounded like indifference. Today it sounded different. Not better. Different. Because now they could hear the fear beneath it. They could hear someone trying to make a decision they never had the right to make alone. And that created another painful realization. You had loved them. But love had not automatically made your choice healthy. You should have told them the truth. Their family should not have interfered. And they themselves should have stopped pretending everything was fine long before everyone around them began making guesses about what they needed. There was no single villain. That made the truth harder. It would have been easier if one person had deliberately destroyed everything. Instead, several people cared badly at the same time. Someone tried to protect. Someone tried not to burden. Someone tried not to interfere. Someone tried not to appear needy. And the relationship disappeared inside all that protection. Your soulmate picked up their phone. They searched for your conversation. For a moment, they simply looked at it. Their last messages with you suddenly felt like evidence from another life. They began typing. I found something out today. Deleted. We need to talk. Deleted. I know what happened now. Deleted again. Because they did not know what they knew. Not completely. They knew why you had stepped back. But they did not know what you feel today. They did not know whether you still think about them. They did not know whether the truth had arrived too late. And perhaps most frightening of all, they did not know whether understanding the past meant the two of you belonged in each other's future. Those are different questions. For the first time, they understood that regret and readiness are not the same thing. Missing someone does not automatically repair what hurt them. Discovering a misunderstanding does not erase the years of silence that followed it. And loving someone once does not entitle anyone to return whenever they finally become brave enough to speak. So they put the phone down. Then picked it up again. They walked around with the unfinished message in their hand. They remembered something else. A conversation from before everything became difficult. You had been talking about people who avoid hard conversations, and they had jokingly said they preferred to let things work themselves out. You had smiled. Then you said, sometimes things don't work themselves out. Sometimes they just become permanent. They had laughed then. Today they did not. Perhaps that is why they finally stopped searching for the perfect words. They realized perfect words were part of the problem. Both of you had spent too much time trying to control how truth would land. So they typed something simpler. I have something important to tell you. They stared at it. Then added. Something happened today, and I learned something about what happened between us that I should have known a long time ago. Their fingers stopped. They considered writing more. An apology. An explanation. A confession. But none of those belonged inside a message designed only to open a door. So they wrote. I don't know what this changes. I'm not asking you to forget anything, and I'm not assuming you want to hear from me. But if you're willing, I think we owe the truth one honest conversation. Then they stopped. That is where this fictional story of hope becomes less about destiny and more about courage. Because the important thing is not whether a message magically repairs everything. The important thing is that, for the first time, someone is willing to stop hiding behind an interpretation. Your soulmate is no longer telling themselves you left because you never cared. And if that conversation reaches you, you will no longer have to pretend stepping away was purely noble. You were afraid too. You allowed somebody else's fear to influence a choice that belonged between two people. You thought sacrifice meant disappearing quietly. Perhaps now you can admit that sometimes silence does not protect love. Sometimes it only protects people from the temporary discomfort of honesty while creating a much longer pain. If you speak again, there will be difficult things to say. They may ask why you never told them. You may ask why they never fought harder. They may tell you they were waiting for you. You may tell them you believed you were giving them what they wanted. Someone may become defensive. Someone may need a moment. Old hurt may rise before tenderness does. That would not mean the conversation failed. It would mean the conversation was real. And somewhere inside that honesty, both of you may finally be able to see the relationship as it actually was, not as the story each of you created after it ended. Maybe forgiveness becomes possible. Maybe friendship is all that remains. Maybe you discover too much has changed. Or perhaps, carefully and without pretending the past never happened, two people who once loved each other begin learning whether they can meet again as the people they have become. No promise is required tonight. No dramatic declaration. No instant return. Only truth. Because there are moments when grace does not arrive as an answer from the sky. Sometimes it appears as the courage to finally have the conversation fear kept postponing. Their phone is still in their hand. Your name is still on the screen. And this time, they are not trying to decide your feelings for you. They are not writing, I know you still love me. They are not writing, we belong together. They are not demanding another chance. They are doing something much smaller. And much harder. They are telling the truth. I have something important to tell you. Something happened today. Then, after one final hesitation, they send it. And for the first time in a long time, the silence between you is no longer being mistaken for an answer.